The HOA president demanded my teenage niece strip down in public. That's not an exaggeration. That's precisely the incident that occurred when Patricia Whitmore, head of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, confronted my 15-year-old niece in the community garden this morning. She positioned herself like an authority figure conducting an inspection, holding her tablet like a shield of office. Dress code regulations are mandatory for every resident, she announced loudly enough for morning walkers to pause and stare. Failure to comply results in immediate documentation and escalation procedures. Sarah stood frozen, wearing her mother's old athletic tank top from high school track, her emotional support animal's leash coiled around her fingers. She hadn't violated any actual regulation. She'd simply been walking. "This is a minor," I stated, positioning myself as a barrier between them. My tone remained controlled and measured. Patricia's expression tightened, her practiced smile becoming strained. "Mr. Harrison, I'd rather avoid unnecessary complications." I activated my phone's recording function, holding it steady. "Too late. You've just instructed an underage person to disrobe publicly. I'm curious how your board will justify this action. Anyone who's witnessed an HOA official realize their overreach knows that particular expression. That split second when authority fractures, that's where everything shifts. Follow along if you're interested in the outcome." What happened next caught Patricia completely off guard. I'm Daniel Harrison, more than just a property owner, former professor of constitutional law. I spent years educating judicial candidates on proper legal procedures. The young woman Patricia attempted to shame is my niece. She came to live with us 8 weeks ago following my sister's death. That athletic shirt was placed in my sister's burial arrangements. Sarah wore it that day not as defiance, but because it still carried her mother's scent. We'd been walking her support animal. I hadn't anticipated needing legal arguments. The community garden path at Willowbrook winds past a weathered wooden bench, one I helped install during the neighborhood's original construction. My sister and I would rest there following school board sessions, finding humor in homeowner association overreach. That bench remains untouched since we laid her to rest. Sarah found comfort there, a peaceful corner with natural shade. She'd been nonverbal at school for 14 days. But that morning she'd ventured outdoors independently, just herself, the animal, and her mother's shirt. Then Patricia chose to target her. Dress code standards are universal regardless of resident age, Patricia insisted, her tone cutting and amplified. Non-compliance triggers additional documentation and potential suspension of community privileges. Sarah's fingers began trembling, prompting me to enter the garden, create a physical barrier, and begin documentation. Patricia immediately retreated, mumbling about misinterpretation and context, yet the harm was inflicted. That's when I understood this wasn't an isolated incident. This was her standard operating procedure. The violation notice in her grip already contained pre-written infractions. She'd arrived seeking someone to discipline, and assumed a bereaved adolescent in athletic wear would be the neighborhood's easiest mark. She was unaware I'd authored the compliance review protocols for residential enforcement committees in our district. She didn't realize my brother Thomas Harrison serves as a civil court judge in the adjacent municipality. She would discover both facts soon. Tell me your location in the comments. I'm interested in your HOA experiences because if you've encountered similar situations, you'll want to continue watching. At the upcoming HOA assembly, Patricia Whitmore will discover the consequences of weaponizing regulations against a legal scholar equipped with documentation and purpose. The following day, I positioned myself in the rear of the HOA conference room, observing silently while Patricia commanded the space like her personal tribunal. The meeting hall carried the scent of cleaning products and privilege. Her delivery was pleasant, yet her statements were surgical. "Proceeding to compliance issues," she announced, reviewing her printed reports and clicking her pen. "We've documented multiple dress code violations in communal areas. I'm proposing stricter enforcement language, particularly for younger residents unfamiliar with community standards." The board members showed no reaction, no acknowledgement of her confrontation with Sarah, no recognition that an adolescent had been ordered to undress publicly, only administrative sanitization. I surveyed the attendees. 3 homeowners, 5 board officials, and Maya Patel positioned at the table's far corner. She avoided eye contact. Patricia continued, presenting the situation as requiring uniformity. She'd even created a presentation with color categories, labeling visual disturbances as a concern classification. The absurdity was striking. Sarah's memorial clothing had become a data point in a formatted presentation. I waited for public commentary. When Patricia finally opened discussion, she surveyed the sparse attendance with an expression lacking warmth.
Any input before financial matters?
I rose deliberately. Daniel Harrison, West Ridge resident. My words resonated in the sterile environment. Yesterday, our HOA president verbally commanded a minor to remove clothing items. This exceeds inappropriate, it's illegal. No guardian was present. No proper procedure followed. The individual isn't even a property holder. Several attendees shifted their attention. Patricia stiffened without interrupting. Your documentation, I proceeded, was completed before any supposed violation. You transformed subjective judgment into threats of community-wide consequences. I'm requesting formal record entry that I view this as authority abuse. Mr. Harrison, Patricia responded tersely. This isn't appropriate timing. This is precisely appropriate, I countered. She began speaking again, but Maya interjected quietly. He maintains speaking rights. Patricia's gaze hardened, but she yielded. I stepped back. That sufficed for now. I wasn't seeking confrontation here. I wanted documentation. I wanted discomfort. Based on the expressions other residents directed at Patricia as proceedings concluded, I wasn't alone. Following adjournment, I encountered Maya in the corridor near supplies storage. She gathered belongings hastily, avoiding eye contact. You witnessed everything, I stated. I have work obligations, she replied softly, moving past. Yet I detected reluctance. She wasn't indifferent. She was frightened. That afternoon, I returned to the garden. The wooden bench remained, smoothed by years and elements. Sarah wasn't there. She hadn't emerged from her room since the incident. I sat alone, absorbing the stillness. The HOA's authority abuse wasn't novel. I'd observed it previously, concealed in administrative documents and disciplinary procedures. What differed was the personal nature. This wasn't merely teenage humiliation. This was my sister's child being penalized for public mourning. My device alerted. HOA correspondence. Secondary violation notice. Identical phrasing, identical classification. Now alleging Sarah demonstrated defiance toward board directives. They were constructing a pattern. They assumed I lacked appropriate response capability. I accessed my computer and examined the association's founding documents and regulation modifications. Pattern recognition came quickly. The dress code provision modification occurred during an emergency session 6 months prior. Yet no emergency was documented. No meeting outline, no attendance record, only voting tallies and Patricia's electronic authorization. That's beyond careless, it's potentially invalid. They'd constructed their appearance policy on procedural fiction. I studied the display, then observed the garden beyond my window. The bench remained constant, immobile, yet its representation, the freedom to rest peacefully, to mourn without scrutiny, remained defensible. Not solely for Sarah, but for every youth wearing inappropriate attire at inopportune moments. I encountered Maya again near the school, clutching documents defensively. The breeze pulled at her clothing, her attention constantly scanning, perhaps avoiding detection. I maintained distance initially, observing her nervous movements, rapid surveillance, someone trapped in unwanted conflict. Once students dispersed, I approached carefully. Maya, she flinched but remained. Daniel. A pause followed. She checked her vehicle, then returned her attention, already partially retreating. Yet she stayed momentarily. You observed the incident, I noted. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her grip tightened on the papers. She appeared drained, conflicted. I was present, she admitted quietly. But intervention wasn't permitted. According to whom? I questioned. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked toward the building entrance. Patricia's quietly revising violation procedures. She's creating appeal obstacles, adding review postponements, redirecting challenges to private panels. I processed this. That's not procedural. That's obstruction. She claimed temporary measures, Maya whispered. Promised simplification later, but documentation's already submitted. I assisted with formatting. That impact exceeded expectations. She wasn't merely observing. She was providing Patricia tools. You recognize her treatment of Sarah was wrong, I stated. Maya didn't dispute it. Instead, her expression hardened before turning away. I followed. You're not responsible here, I said. But you're enabling someone who is. She paused at her vehicle briefly without speaking. You believe this is voluntary? My daughter lives here. I must remain inconspicuous or Patricia targets her next. I comprehended that fear. I despise comprehending it. I'm not requesting public exposure, I clarified. Not immediately, but if documentation exists, records, correspondence, timestamps proving improper voting, I require access. She didn't agree, but didn't refuse either. That evening, Sarah emerged after days of isolation. I discovered her at the garden bench, knees drawn up, sweatshirt pulled close. The dog rested alongside, head on her leg. Wind increased, leaves dancing across pavement like secrets. I didn't cry when Mom passed, she said softly. I sat carefully beside her, avoiding contact. She always claimed crying made people treat you as a project. I wanted strength. I didn't respond, allowing silent space. But when that woman confronted me, her voice fractured. I felt contaminated, like I was somehow wrong. I shut my eyes. That element Patricia would never comprehend. The damage wasn't regulatory. It was humiliation. She weaponized Mom's shirt, Sarah whispered. I just wanted connection with her. You did nothing wrong, I assured. And I promise resolution. She didn't look up, but didn't leave either. The next morning brought an unmarked envelope beneath my door. No identification, no sender. Contents included 2 documents. First, a calendar record from 6 months prior, showing Patricia's emergency session designation citing electrical failure. However, neighborhood communications confirmed power restoration by midday. The vote occurred at 8 evening. Second, a draft modification, handwritten annotations throughout, Patricia's script. Adjacent to youth attire guidelines, notation stated, this language eliminates parental exemption. Maya had provided assistance. 2 days brought another delivery. This time an official HOA envelope, the type reserved for formal proceedings. Contents: official community hearing notification for persistent non-compliance and leadership obstruction. They attempted forcing me into formal dispute procedures as though I violated protocol. They couldn't retreat. Not now. Patricia was intensifying because she recognized my advantage. Yet she pursued another strategy too. I'd observed this approach previously. Apply sufficient pressure, overwhelm with documentation, then propose quiet withdrawal for silence. It succeeded with uninformed residents, but not me. I delivered the envelope directly to community administration. The HOA's reception area maintained deliberate discomfort, subtle control. I recognized the administrator but didn't pause. Patricia's door stood ajar and I entered without announcement. She glanced up from her screen, hand still positioned on the mouse. Her expression remained neutral. Mr. Harrison, you've transformed a violation into personal assault, I stated, placing the document on her surface. We both recognize this hearing lacks foundation. Board approval was unanimous, she responded calmly, based on improperly ratified code. Based on appearance policy passed without proper assembly. Her mouth twitched minimally. She reclined. That gathering followed emergency protocol. No emergency existed. Electrical issues resolved by noon. Your assembly occurred after sunset. The following quiet was sharp and thin. For the initial time I observed calculation in her eyes. Present your concerns at the hearing, she stated evenly. You're attempting to obscure procedural failure by fabricating compliance disputes. Believing sufficient noise prevents document examination. Patricia leaned forward. This isn't a courthouse, Mr. Harrison. No, but it's similar enough. I departed without awaiting response. Outside wind had strengthened. The kind carrying memories of disputes in medical center parking areas. Of final words not recognized as final until later. My sister claimed Patricia wasn't malicious, just narrow-minded. I disagreed. Limited minds with authority cause greater harm than cruel ones. They consider their regulations moral. That evening I informed Sarah about hearing attendance. She questioned speaking requirements. No, I assured. Just accompany me. She hesitated. Will they stare? Likely. Then I'll wear it again, she declared. The shirt. I sensed something shifting then, not vocally but posturally. She was finished concealing. I devoted hours examining HOA regulations systematically. Emergency modification regulations demanded 3 criteria: legitimate resident safety concern, public notice within 24 hours, and verified attendance. Patricia possessed none. The provision permitting board discipline of non-homeowners didn't exist. Every action against Sarah was procedurally invalid. Yet this exceeded citation invalidation. It demonstrated Patricia's foundation wasn't legal. It was illusion. I printed relevant provisions, highlighted contradictions. I created board copies. I wouldn't approach this as homeowner defending property. I would deconstruct it as scholar dissecting flawed reasoning, still part worried about relevance. Patricia didn't fear being incorrect. She feared losing dominance. That night, someone passed our home and discarded crumpled paper in the yard. I discovered it near the entrance. Identical formatting to previous materials. Patricia's standard font reading, "Community standards aren't optional. If you cannot follow regulations, relocate." Sarah discovered it first. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply retrieved it, folded carefully, and placed it beside my documentation, then entered and closed the door. Sleep eluded me. My thoughts circled identical passages, identical articles. HOA codes dressed in procedural terminology but stripped bare, represented neighborhood politics with letterhead. Patricia constructed authority assuming nobody would examine supporting structure. Dawn brought coffee and returned to Maya's anonymous documents. One internal draft from 6 months prior listed Patricia as sole creator of Visual Compliance Framework. The terminology was manipulative. Elevated public comfort standards, visual harmony, shared family sensibility. But the revelation wasn't language. It was margins. Patricia's handwriting appeared in hurried loops. Add minor specific provision. Must circumvent parental discretion. Below, parenthetically, prevent another Harrison-Niece situation. I read repeatedly before weight registered. She'd written this before confronting Sarah. That phrase, Harrison-Niece, meant we were already targeted. Perhaps from my sister's death, perhaps earlier. This wasn't policy. It was premeditation. That morning, I drove directly to district clerk's office. Not distant, just beyond the library behind estate planning firms. I registered, provided identification, and waited under flickering fluorescence. When called, I made one request. All HOA filing records from Willowbrook Estates for 12 months. The clerk raised eyebrows but didn't question. 30 minutes produced a packet, and Patricia had erred. The emergency vote establishing layered clothing policy, it lacked quorum. 3 board members appeared via proxy. Legal under certain conditions, but proxy signatures weren't filed. No timestamps, no verification, no physical attendance. Essentially, the modification had no legal basis. Without it, dress code citations vanished. Violation notices invalid. Hearing unenforceable. I remained in my vehicle outside the clerk's office, packet spread across passenger seat. Evidence found. Not hidden document, not fortunate discovery, just documentation hiding openly, because Patricia believed nobody would verify. I sent digitized copies to 3 recipients. First, my brother Thomas, civil judge, off-duty but thorough. Second, my former colleague Richard from University's Public Policy Division. Third, Maya. I didn't know if she'd respond. I didn't know if she wanted to, but I needed her awareness I wasn't bluffing. At home, I explained truth to Sarah. I arranged documents on table and detailed how Patricia's entire policy rested on void vote, false filing, and fabricated signatures. Sarah listened intently, fingers following paper edges. "Is this your teaching method?" she questioned. "Essentially," I responded. "Then teach her," she stated. "Demonstrate to everyone." No fear in her tone, only certainty. Later evening, as sun descended behind trees bathing porch in amber, phone alerted. "Unrecognized number," I answered. "You are correct," Maya stated. Proxies never signed. Patricia drafted them independently, claiming later handling. Her voice was flat, exhausted. "I cannot testify. Too much risk, but I confirm vote fabrication. If you need my notes, I retain original draft with her revisions." I didn't express gratitude. I understood she wasn't acting for me. She acted recognizing her position finally. After disconnection, I went outside. Wind gentled that night. Porch swing groaned under weight, unchanged. The flyer from previous night remained folded beside ashtray. I ignited match and touched corner to flame. It curled rapidly, darkening from edges inward until only thin ash remained and a girl's name Patricia never should have documented. Next morning brought silence. No flyers, no HOA announcements, no community-wide correspondence disguised as concern. Only sunlight penetrating blinds and quiet feeling incomplete. Sarah was already awake. She stood at kitchen window holding cereal spoon long gone soft. She didn't turn speaking. She knows we're coming, correct? Correct. Sarah nodded once, then placed spoon down. Her expression had transformed over the week. Grief remained, still woven through every quiet look, but now accompanied by something sharper. Determination, not revenge, simply clarity. I explained we'd attend community center that evening, submitting formal hearing rebuttal. I wanted her present. She didn't hesitate. I'll wear the shirt. Patricia had miscalculated pressing this far. She presumed we'd yield, that I'd accept warning shots, retreat, and continue. But she didn't perceive fight's depth for me. The HOA wasn't merely targeting policy. It attacked legacy. My sister fought harder battles against judges, physicians, social workers. She'd taught Sarah maintaining dignity when world attempted crushing it. That strength didn't derive from compliance. It originated knowing when refusing. Around noon, I acted. I entered Willowbrook Estates administrative office. Not HOA meeting space, but actual property management liaison for community, separate from Patricia's direct control. The woman at desk appeared startled as I provided sealed manila envelope. This constitutes formal procedural challenge to emergency vote conducted 6 months ago. Per HOA bylaws section 9.4, all governance modifications must remain available for resident review. I'm exercising that right. She accepted with both hands. Would you like receipt? No, I stated. I want it reviewed. Contents included everything: fabricated proxy votes, handwritten provision naming Sarah, timestamp discrepancy on emergency submission, a signed cover letter from former policy chair at State University, my former colleague, declaring plainly vote was legally irreparable and structurally void under procedural law. That alone would mandate enforcement halt. But I wasn't finished. After envelope delivery, I walked neighborhood perimeter. Not pacing, not ranting, simply observing. Observing neighbors maintaining lawns, children riding bicycles, retirees sweeping entrances. The people Patricia claimed protecting. The same people she controlled through fear of becoming next. That afternoon, Sarah and I sat together at bench. She didn't speak much, neither did I, but we remained, and that mattered. Then around 5, phone alerted again. Another unknown number. This time I knew identity before answering. Daniel. Patricia's voice was clipped tight. I've received your packet. Obviously. There's no necessity escalating further. Too late. A pause. You're attempting structure destruction. I'm exposing it. If it collapses under scrutiny, it was never structure. It was scaffolding concealing decay. She didn't disconnect. She didn't shout. She just breathed. Quiet, calculating. You've created a formidable adversary, she stated finally. No, you have. I terminated call. Sun descended lower, casting extended shadows across stone beneath feet. Sarah stood and cleared hands. Ready? I questioned. She nodded, pulling shirt over sweatshirt. We walked to clubhouse together. Not pleading, not debating, simply delivering what Patricia worked avoiding. Challenge grounded not in anger or speculation, but law. Upon entering, I noticed bulletin board near entrance, identical one displaying HOA warnings and neighborhood updates. Someone had posted new notice. No formatting, no color, single sentence in bold black text. A regulation without legitimacy constitutes disguised harassment. No name, no emblem, no signature. But sufficient, making Patricia's attention snap toward it upon entering 5 minutes later. Maya appeared just after sunset. She didn't knock, simply stood on entrance with small storage device in hand and eyes avoiding mine. Her hair remained damp, as though departing work hastily without drying. I opened door and she entered, understanding cost. I archived everything, she stated. Drafts, timestamps, recordings. Nothing obtained illegally. All stored in shared directory. Patricia never secured anything. She simply assumed we'd never examine. I didn't touch device. Not immediately. Certain? Maya's jaw twitched. I observed that girl react like undergoing interrogation, and I remained silent. Certain. We sat at kitchen table, identical table Sarah had cleared earlier before ascending stairs. I positioned laptop between us and she connected drive. It activated softly, quiet and lethal. Initial file was voice recording dated 3 days before emergency modification vote. Patricia's voice sharp and smug. We'll term it visual harmony. Everyone dislikes decency terminology. Too easily challenged. If anyone protests age provision, we'll bury under parental compliance language. Nobody reads bylaws regardless. Next file documented vote timeline. Proved vote conducted entirely through unofficial email approvals. And Patricia stamped fabricated emergency date justifying quorum bypass. Then came crucial evidence. Screenshot of group message between Patricia and two board members, hours following Sarah confrontation. Message stated he's some retired attorney. We should issue nuisance citation promptly. Make him appear aggressive. Exceeded procedural abuse now. Became targeted retaliation, preemptive suppression. Now evidence. Maya sat quietly as I reviewed everything. Hands remained folded still and tight. I'm not courageous, she stated finally. I simply refused remaining cowardly. You transformed everything, I stated. She stood departing, but I stopped at door. You needn't be visible. I'll redact identification. I'll absorb consequences. No, she stated, voice unwavering. Utilize everything. If I permitted that girl accepting shame, I should accept truth. After departure, I sat extended at table. I possessed everything now. Illegal vote. Intentional targeting, rewritten policies disguised in euphemism and control. I'd witnessed corruption previously. Academic committees concealing tenure disputes, nonprofits masking donor favoritism. But this felt different. This became personal. Bleeding into child's grief, into daily existence, into quiet bench she no longer occupied alone. Upstairs, footsteps sounded. Sarah descended in socks, sweatshirt drawn tight. She stood at stairs base observing me. Victory assured, correct? Wasn't policy question. Was safety question. Uncertain they'll perceive correctly, I stated. But I'll demonstrate their actions and cost. She nodded and sat opposite. I rotated laptop, allowing her viewing screenshot. Her eyes scanned message slowly, then stopped. That's her voice? She questioned, indicating memo. Correct. Sarah didn't speak momentarily. Then looked through window, past entrance toward clubhouse where hearing would occur soon. They must hear also, she stated, not merely file in room. I didn't question readiness. I didn't question certainty. I simply closed lid and reached for printer. Because next portion wouldn't occur behind doors, would occur under lights before people Patricia once controlled through silence. By morning, I'd printed everything. Each file received cover sheet. Included timelines, annotations, footnotes from state HOA guidelines. Even added summary page, not speculation, not emotion, simply procedural fact. Dismantling Patricia's dress code policy required using her terms. Cold, administrative, untouchable. Sarah observed hole-punching final packet. Think she'll review? Unnecessary. Others will. Wasn't relying on Patricia seeing reason, counting on board recognizing liability. How bureaucracies collapse when supporters realize standing under crumbling structure. By midday, at print shop creating 36 full dossier copies. Clerk didn't question, just observed HOA header and provided knowing expression. Outside air thick with late spring humidity. Drove past clubhouse. Observing volunteers posting garden walk signs. One paused, eyes following vehicle before quickly averting. They'd heard something. Rumors always preceded facts, but this time running toward truth. Home arrival found brown envelope waiting entrance. Inside typed unsigned note. Some always recognized her overreach. Not all will protect her now. No name, but someone folded once carefully, intending permanence. Afternoon, prepared submission email to board, all attachments, documentation, and formal hearing rebuttal. Outlined procedural vote failings, quorum absence, fabricated proxy utilization, and deliberate minor targeting through unlawful enforcement. Didn't argue motion. Didn't mention Sarah. Let evidence work. Hard copy differed. That packet would accompany me because Patricia needed witnessing damage printed. Spent evening walking neighborhood. Not canvassing, not campaigning, simply being visible. People noticed. Didn't wave, but observed. One corner man, unspoken to in weeks, provided subtle acknowledgement passing. Home, Sarah arranged hearing clothes. Shirt clean and pressed. Identical one, identical color, identical emblem mother wore. She would have advised against wearing, she stated. Would have advised doing what provided strength, I responded. Sarah folded carefully, smoothing him. She despised bullies, she whispered. Same. Later evening received email, not Patricia, from HOA Treasurer Robert Mitchell. Someone barely speaking during meetings, always trailing Patricia's rhetoric. Email brief. Daniel, for consideration, I didn't vote emergency measure. My name added afterward. Discovered last week, Robert. Changed everything. One signature Patricia claimed as quorum wasn't. Meant entire modification didn't merely lack standing. Was falsified, called Thomas. Brother didn't request drama. Only wanted facts. Provided every detail. Upon finishing, voice quiet. If confirmed, he stated. Examining potential fraud. Court isn't interest. Might lack choice. Observed packet still on dining table. She hurt child, I stated. That's my only concern. You possess structure. Remember center. Didn't sleep much, but unnecessary. Within 24 hours, we'd enter that room, and Patricia would finally confront regulations she believed owning. Arrived early. Clubhouse doors remained locked, but wanted being initial face witnessed. Not intimidating, simply present, calm, prepared, difficult ignoring. Sarah walked beside, stepped slow but steady. Wore shirt, mother's identical, initiating everything. Didn't speak, didn't observe surroundings, but chin lifted, sufficient. Door opening, found 3 other residents waiting behind. None spoke, but one woman 3 houses distant provided small acknowledgement entering. Chairs arranged 2 rows, rigid and inexpensive. Extended folding table front served board's platform, supported by vinyl HOA banner. American flag stood limp corner. Patricia's seat centered, elevated slightly, reminding everyone who believed commanding. Placed packet every chair before room filled. Board members, residents, even one reporter from local weekly catching wind brewing conflict. Didn't question who informed. Patricia arrived, heels clicking sharp against tile. Wore navy blue, polished and pressed. Didn't observe me walking seat, but eyes caught folder's table. Hand froze half-second sliding chair. Good, she recognized. Robert Mitchell entered next. Provided brief glance and initially didn't avert. Room filled slowly. Few whispers, few sideways glances, mostly silence. People didn't attend these meetings unless something personal risked or someone exceeded limits. Meeting began Patricia's usual script. Call order, review minutes, budget update, then proceeding resident compliance hearings. She glanced upward. Mr. Harrison, floor yours. Stood. No anger, no theatrics. Present today, not arguing opinion, but submitting formal objection HOA modification, passed 6 months ago under emergency quorum, not meeting legal standards. Few murmurs behind. Opened folder. Emergency clause requires 3 conditions. Verified safety issue, 24-hour posted agenda, and documented quorum. None met. Power outage cited justification ended 8 hours before vote. Held screenshot Patricia's own filing. Furthermore, proxy vote used claiming quorum since denied by board member questioned. Not present, didn't approve. Looked directly Robert. Jaw tightened but nodded once, finished. Patricia shifted chair. Mr. Harrison, hearing regarding citation. Hearing triggered by citation, stated. But citation-based policy lacking standing. Without valid modification, you enforced non-existent regulation on minor without guardian consent public space. Silence sharpened. Continued. Packet contains documents supporting procedural invalidity, audio evidence targeted retaliation, and written confirmation vote conducted through improper proxy attribution. Therefore, submitting formal motion nullifying policy and voiding all citations issued under. Patricia's voice tight. You lack standing. According Section 5.3 bylaws, any homeowner right challenging governance procedures. Not requesting, exercising right. Opened mouth again before speaking, another voice broke silence. Second motion, Robert Mitchell. Room shifted. Patricia blinked. What? Listed vote that meeting. Never provided, correct. Vote invalid. Patricia's hand trembled slightly, gripping table edge. Discuss closed session. No, Robert stated. Vote now. Room watched. Nobody moved. Then another board member raised hand, then another. Individually voted. And initially years, Patricia's voice didn't control outcome. Patricia didn't vacate seat immediately. Even after final vote passed, unanimous without her, remained unmoving, fingers still curled around armrest willing decision reversal. Face frozen between disbelief and fury, but voice silenced. Someone building power on presence, silence, loudest loss. Robert cleared throat. Formally amend minutes reflecting emergency modification revocation and citation nullification issued under. Patricia didn't object. Didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. Simply observed folder front and closed gently. Behind heard someone whisper, "Actually accomplished." But hadn't. Not yet. After motion recorded, stood again. One additional matter. Patricia's head jerked slightly reflex. Stepped forward holding separate envelope. This marked plain sticker reading internal only legal advisory. Inside memo Maya sent last unused yet. Contained Patricia's email board's legal counsel 3 days before confronting Sarah. Floated idea expanding enforcement practices minors, deterring adult non-compliance, calling strategic deterrent high emotional return. Laid table slowly. Document demonstrates intent, not enforcement, not misunderstanding. Intent. Words landed stones. Board member. Woman green sweater only observed taking notes. Leaned forward, face pale. Real? Robert examined paper, then me. Certain hers? Used identical phrasing voice memo Maya submitted. Strategic deterrent. Didn't state once. Stated twice. Patricia finally spoke, voice low. Controlled. Internal strategy planning. Wasn't policy. Used my niece, stated, voice remaining calm. Warning other residents. Targeted grieving child scaring community into obedience. Not strategy, abuse, nobody defended. Patricia stood slowly, chair scraping tile behind. Character assassination, she hissed. Provided 5 years community. And resign from board tomorrow morning, Robert interrupted. Or bring county compliance. Patricia's face reddened, didn't speak. Didn't argue. Didn't deny. Simply gathered papers, slow, angry motions, and exited door. Heels clicking against tile like retreating gunfire. Moment departed. Felt air room shifted. Someone finally opened window after years stale air. No applause, no cheers. Stillness heavy and wide board adjourned meeting. Residents quietly filed out. Waited near exit Sarah. Remained seated throughout, eyes forward, expression unreadable. Approaching now, observed something different. Shoulders weren't hunched. Steps weren't small. Appeared taller. Outside, night air cooler, expected, crisp, honest. Walked silence block. Then stopped right corner where clubhouse path curved toward garden. Didn't think she'd break, stated. Didn't, responded. Cracked. Board dropped. Sarah nodded slowly. Worse, correct. Power like Patricia's doesn't end fight. Ends when people behind stop pretending real home. Placed final evidence packet box marked HOA's name. Wouldn't destroy, not yet. Not while memory fresh. Not while stain lingered. Night sat porch swing. Sarah joined. No words time. Simply quiet. Then questioned, bench fate now? Looked toward garden distance. Remains. Leaned head shoulder and initially since started felt weight shift. Not lift entirely. Settle way meant weren't holding alone anymore. Special community meeting scheduled following Thursday evening. Robert called, citing transparency and procedural correction. Wasn't mandatory, but word spread faster. Fire cul-de-sac. Sunset clubhouse packed. Never witnessed many chairs filled. Couples casual attire, parents strollers wedged between knees, retirees clutching agenda copies like courtroom summons. Wasn't just Patricia anymore. About fear instilled and how easily board permitted. Air buzzed tension, not hostile, watchful. Robert stood room front behind borrowed podium. HOA banner removed. No flag, no fanfare. Called meeting. Began. Voice calm, unwavering. Addressing not just recent policy reversal, but deeper issues permitting occurrence. Looked over crowd, no notes, just folder hands. Those missing last hearing determined emergency modification. Passed 6 months ago, procedurally invalid. Vote lacked quorum and approvals falsely attributed. Few gasps. Ripple whispering. Since voided modification, rescinded all citations under, and accepted Patricia Whitmore's resignation HOA president role. Didn't pause applause, none came. Room wasn't celebrating. Understanding. Now no, Robert continued. Some actions weren't mistakes. Calculated. Stepped aside. IQ didn't bring Sarah, didn't need room tonight. Faced enough. Approached podium box arms. Same box sat dining table weeks. Inside everything. Printed memos, timestamps, meeting schedules, proxy sign-ins, and Patricia's own handwriting outlining plan using enforcement weapon. Didn't observe notes, unnecessary. Named Daniel Harrison. Some know me. Some probably heard rumors niece incident. Not retelling. Open box placed table beside. Here because community almost permitted child used example. Did because trusted procedure over people. Silence thickened. Let policy slip performance. Patricia called enforcement. Was humiliation. Worse, wrapped language sounding professional. Man second row crossed arms, nodding slowly. Woman near wall observed shoes. Held sheet, original dress code violation, dated signed. Never about modesty. About control. Set down. Held another group chat screenshot. What stated thinking, nobody watching. Few leaned forward, reading distance. Not just family. About how quickly silence becomes endorsement. Neighborhood forgot saying no. Paused, let words settle. Robert stepped forward again. Distributed documentation copies. Opening floor, hands raised. Not angry, not aggressive. People ready speaking after too long quiet. Man questioned replacement policy. Woman questioned other citations Patricia's term reviewed. Then teenager, maybe 16, hair tied back, arms crossed, stood, stated. So someone like her tries again, what stops? Robert observed me. Answered, we do. Returned garden Sunday. No speeches, no flyers, no HOA notices pinned passive-aggressively doors. Quiet grass trimmed too short. For spring, and the stone bench where everything initiated. Sarah traced fingers along weathered edge. The texture where elements and time eroded surface. I sat beside, hands clasped, sensing week's weight settling somewhere beneath chest. They replaced signage at clubhouse, she mentioned. Simply states community board currently. No titles, no names. Perhaps that's preferable. She examined carved markings near base. Ones my sister etched herself, day bench completed. Small permanence act in place constructed on shifting regulations. They wanted silence, Sarah stated. Believed I'd be too ashamed resisting. Believed we'd collapse, I responded, because that's typical occurrence. Didn't require further explanation. She comprehended now what I hadn't taught through lectures or legal briefs. Sometimes the only thing more hazardous than written regulation is community refusing questioning it. Robert sent message night following meeting. Patricia had emptied files, returned keys, and submitted notarized statement indicating stepping away from governance positions indefinitely. No apology. Merely exit strategy wrapped formality. But that didn't matter. What mattered was construction from remnants. New review process, 3-person resident panel, provision guaranteeing no minor disciplined, without guardian notification, and standing regulation future policy votes must accompany full attendance documentation made public within 48 hours. They termed it Harrison Standard. Didn't request that. Didn't desire name attached. But Sarah smiled reading it, so permitted standing. While seated bench, sky turned golden behind trees. Light flowing slowly. Couple passed with toddler following. Teenager rolled past on skateboard. And initially months, nobody appeared walking cautiously. Think I want documenting this, Sarah stated. Observed her. At school, she added. Not merely events, but feelings and transformation. That's your voice, I stated. Utilize however necessary, she reclined against bench. Think they'll care? Perhaps not initially, but sufficient will. Remained there extended, not mourning, not even reflecting, simply existing space now feeling reclaimed. Not through force, through truth. When finally standing, she touched bench once more. Let's remember this, she stated. We will. Walked home together, silence side by side. And if you desire additional accounts homeowners confronting HOA tyranny, subscribe immediately. Share your account comments and inform me viewing location. I'll complete and expand this HOA confrontation story to reach 5,000 words. For spring, and the stone bench where everything initiated, Sarah traced fingers along weathered edge. The texture where elements and time eroded surface. I sat beside, hands clasped, sensing week's weight settling somewhere beneath chest. They replaced signage at clubhouse, she mentioned. Simply states community board currently. No titles, no names. Perhaps that's preferable. She examined carved markings near base. Ones my sister etched herself, day bench completed. Small permanence act in place constructed on shifting regulations. They wanted silence, Sarah stated. Believed I'd be too ashamed resisting. Believed we'd collapse, I responded, because that's typical occurrence. Didn't require further explanation. She comprehended now what I hadn't taught through lectures or legal briefs. Sometimes the only thing more hazardous than written regulation is community refusing questioning it. Robert sent message night following meeting. Patricia had emptied files, returned keys, and submitted notarized statement indicating stepping away from governance positions indefinitely. No apology, merely exit strategy wrapped formality. But that didn't matter. What mattered was construction from remnants. New review process, 3-person resident panel, provision guaranteeing no minor disciplined, without guardian notification, and standing regulation future policy votes must accompany full attendance documentation made public within 48 hours. They termed it Harrison Standard. Didn't request that. Didn't desire name attached, but Sarah smiled reading it, so permitted standing. While seated bench, sky turned golden behind trees, light flowing slowly. Couple passed with toddler following. Teenager rolled past on skateboard. And initially months nobody appeared walking cautiously. Think I want documenting this, Sarah stated. Observed her. At school, she added. Not merely events but feelings and transformation. That's your voice, I stated. Utilize however necessary, she reclined against bench. Think they'll care? Perhaps not initially, but sufficient will. Remained there extended, not mourning, not even reflecting, simply existing space now feeling reclaimed. Not through force, through truth. When finally standing, she touched bench once more. Let's remember this, she stated. We will. Walked home together, silent, side by side. The following weeks brought unexpected transformation throughout Meadowbrook community. Margaret Chen, resident from Willow Street who'd remained silent during initial meetings, approached me at mailboxes one afternoon. Her hands trembled slightly, holding stack of envelopes. Evidence nervousness hadn't completely dissipated despite Patricia's departure. Wanted thanking you, Margaret began, voice barely above whisper. My son received citation last year for skateboarding past 8 evening. They fined us $300, threatened placing lien on property if we didn't pay immediately. Never questioned it because assumed they possessed that authority. They didn't, I responded firmly. According to community covenants, fines require written warning first, then hearing before assessment. Did you receive either? Margaret shook head slowly, realization dawning across features. Nothing. Just citation appearing taped to door one morning, demanding payment within 10 days. Paid immediately because terrified losing home. She paused, gathering courage for next words. Is there possibility recovering that money? Absolutely, I assured her. Under new review process, any improperly assessed fines from previous 2 years can be challenged. Bring documentation to next board meeting. I'll help you present case. Margaret's eyes filled with tears of relief and anger combined. Why didn't anyone stop this sooner? How many others suffered silently? That question haunted me during subsequent days as more residents emerged with similar stories. The Peterson family had been fined $500 for parking commercial vehicle in driveway overnight, despite vehicle being standard pickup truck their teenage son used for landscaping business. The Ramirez family faced $1,000 fine for installing solar panels without permission, even though state law explicitly prohibited HOAs from denying renewable energy installations. Each story revealed pattern of intimidation, financial exploitation, and deliberate ignorance of actual legal limitations on HOA authority. Patricia and her allies had constructed empire built on fear and misinformation, counting on residents being too intimidated or uninformed to challenge their overreach. I compiled every case into comprehensive document, organizing them chronologically and by violation type. The pattern was unmistakable and disturbing. Over 18 months, the previous board had collected approximately $47,000 in questionable fines, many assessed without proper procedure or legal foundation. Robert reviewed my findings during meeting at local coffee shop, his expression growing increasingly grave as he turned pages. This is worse than imagined, he muttered, removing glasses to rub tired eyes. Some of these fines blatantly violate state statutes. Patricia must have known. She couldn't have been this ignorant. She wasn't ignorant, I replied. She was calculating, targeting families she perceived as vulnerable, those less likely to challenge authority or afford legal representation. Immigrants, single parents, elderly residents on fixed incomes. People who couldn't risk antagonizing those controlling their housing situation. Robert nodded slowly. We need addressing this properly, not just refunding money but ensuring nothing like this happens again. May I share this with community attorney? We might need her guidance on how to proceed. Of course, that's exactly what I hoped you'd say. The attorney, Jennifer Wu, was a sharp woman in her 40s, specializing in property law and HOA governance. She reviewed my document thoroughly, occasionally making notes in margins and highlighting specific passages. When she finally looked up, her expression was serious. "This is substantial evidence of systematic misconduct," Jennifer stated professionally. "While I can't provide legal advice to individual residents, I can tell you the board has obligation to remedy these situations. The good news is you've documented everything meticulously. The challenging news is this will require significant work to resolve properly." She outlined plan of action. First, notify all affected residents about review process. Second, establish independent arbitration panel to examine each case. Third, create restitution plan for improperly assessed fines. Fourth, implement new oversight mechanisms preventing future abuse. The community needs understanding this isn't just about money, Jennifer emphasized. It's about restoring trust and establishing legitimate governance. That requires transparency, accountability, and commitment to following actual rules rather than making them up as you go. Over next 6 weeks, the transformation was remarkable. New board established open office hours twice weekly where residents could ask questions, voice concerns, or request information without fear of retaliation. Meeting minutes were posted online within 24 hours. Financial records became accessible to any homeowner upon request. The arbitration panel, consisting of retired judge from neighboring community, a certified mediator, and a real estate attorney, reviewed 43 contested fines. They found 38 lacked proper procedural foundation and ordered full refunds. The remaining 5 were modified to reflect appropriate amounts according to actual covenant provisions. But perhaps most significant change was cultural. Residents who had previously avoided board meetings out of fear or apathy began attending regularly. They asked questions, offered suggestions, and held leadership accountable in constructive ways. The community was learning how to govern itself properly. Sarah's essay about the experience won first place in county-wide writing competition. She titled it, "When Silence Breaks, One Family's Fight Against HOA Overreach." The piece was published in local newspaper, sparking conversations throughout region about HOA accountability and homeowner rights. I found her reading printed copy on that same stone bench one warm afternoon, sunlight filtering through maple leaves creating dancing shadows across pages. She looked up as I approached, genuine smile replacing the haunted expression she'd worn for months. "Mrs. Chen called today," Sarah reported. "Said she received full refund plus formal apology. She cried on phone, kept saying she never thought justice was possible for people like her." "People like her?" I questioned, settling onto bench beside her. "Immigrants, people with accents, people who don't know all the rules and feel like they can't question authority." Sarah's voice carried weight of understanding beyond her years. She said I gave her daughter courage to speak up in their own lives. "That's bigger than any fine refund." I placed arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "That's the real victory. Not defeating Patricia or recovering money, but showing an entire community that ordinary people possess power when they refuse accepting injustice silently." We sat quietly for several minutes, watching community live around us. Children played in nearby park. Elderly couple walked dog along sidewalk. Teenager practiced skateboarding tricks in street, no longer glancing nervously over shoulder for citation-wielding board members. "Dad," Sarah said eventually, "I've been thinking about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "After high school,